All right. And we are live. It is Friday. I don't even know what date it is. I just know it's a Friday. I am Cate Luzio. I'm the founder and CEO at Luminary and the host of Goaldigger, a weekly series on LinkedIn Live where we discuss and talk to incredible leaders across all industries. Number one, about how they found their voice, but how they're helping others find their voice. And there is no one better to talk about this and what she's done in her past to what she's doing today than Charlie Grosso, the founder and executive director of Hello Future. When I found out about what Hello Future did, I fell in love and I immediately got involved. So I know a lot of you will want to do that, but let's talk to Charlie first and welcome her to the show. So welcome, Charlie.
Thank you, Kay. Thank you for having me. By the way, I love the name Goaldigger for the show.
It's very apropos, right? It's like we're all out there just trying to get after it. And I think while we never discriminate and we love men, we tend to have women leaders on this. And I think we are so focused on our goals and going after those, but doing them together, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, since we met, it was like fast friendship, love at first sight. How do we support each other? What's a win-win look like? So, well, welcome. I want the audience to hear about Hello Future, absolutely. But what's so incredible and part of this story is where you came from to get you to where you are today with starting Hello Future about 5 years ago. So let's hear a little bit about Charlie and your story.
Oh, I've had a really interesting journey going, as a graduated University of Southern California with a theater degree to an professional advertising photographer, skinny models and beautiful clothes and, Snoop Dogs, and to now being a nonprofit leader in education and working with adolescent refugees. Prior to these last 5-6 years with Hello Future, I was a career photographer, creative director, very kind of advertising media based universe.
Out in California.
Out in California. And there was always something that just was missing for me in that setup, right? I love the work. I still love photography. I think media is super important in how it changes perception, and the change in perception influences public sentiment, and then that has all sorts of effects in the kind of policies that we write and how we spend our money, in really big kind of picture outcomes that that we don't quite think about in the 10, 20 years, 30-year increments. So I was working in advertising, and there was always something missing for me. I wanted a deeper conversation. I wanted a deeper conversation on what were we doing to young women and young men with these images that we're pushing out, right? And this was very much so the decade of Sex and the City and Abercrombie and Finch.
Yeah.
And those were not perspectives clients were interested in.
Or you.
I was interested in it, right? Like I wanted that conversation. I wanted to see how we can create
those images, work. Right? You were sort of clients weren't interested in having those conversations. They were like, let's just put out what we need to put out.
Exactly, right? And I was like, but like these conversation is doing X harm, right? Like there's a greater impact out of what we're creating here, right? So like, can we maybe try something else? And clients were like, no, let's just do this. This is great.
Same old.
I like size 0 girls in like $800 dresses.
And this is what, in the early 2000s?
Yeah, this is early 2000s.
So representation then was like not even a word. Now, honestly, no one cared about it. It wasn't being talked about. I tell the story all the time when I got into banking. Diversity wasn't even discussed, right? I don't even remember that even being a word until well into my career as a banker. But representation and having different voices and different faces around the table, never mind having that represented in your customer, wasn't even a concept.
Oh yeah, 100%. So 2008 flattened me out like everybody else did, and I, left Los Angeles for New York City, and then I kind of chased my documentary career for a while. I've produced a really large body of work on food markets across the world, and again, it was about this relationship between what we see and what we do, right? How we perceive the food and the environment in which we, procure them in changes our relationship to the food, to the animal, to the land, to the people.
Yeah.
So I traveled all over the world with that project, and still trying to put it together as a book. So that led me to, in some ways, to Hello Future. I think everything in my life has led me to Hello Future in some really kind of serendipitous, ways. So it's 2015. I'm closing down my art gallery. So when I moved to New York, I opened a contemporary art gallery space with a friend. We ran that as a pop-up 6 months out of the time. And then the other 6 months I would be on the road working on my documentary project. So we were sunsetting the art gallery, and I was kind of trying to figure out what was next. So this is 2015. The refugee crisis had hit this really big crescendo moment in media. And I just felt so compelled. I was so pulled to that space. I had a very difficult upbringing, especially for my teenage years. I was sent away to a different country. I didn't speak the language. I didn't know anybody. So I felt like I could understand the emotional landscape the refugees were trafficking in, right? How it feels to be alone, stuck, and forgotten by the world. So I moved to Istanbul. I wanted to understand better. I want to understand better. That was the first intent. I didn't really have a super clear idea on what I wanted to do. I thought maybe it was like a book or a film, something back again, the creative space that, I spent 20 years in.
Yeah.
But in my conversations with refugees, I was really interested in their experience with technology. Like, what is that relationship? As you know, the Middle East has a really high mobile phone penetration. It's like 1.1 per adult, right? But they're still on a pay-per-play model. So they're buying data bundles for, $10, $20 in those increments, which makes them more expensive.
Right. And less accessible.
Absolutely. But everybody had one, and everybody was spending money on it. So that tells me that like this relationship here was important. So I wanted to know what they did with it. So I started interviewing refugee families, and I would ask, what do you do with your mobile phone? First, do you have one? Second of all, what do you do with it? And they will always say, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. And I'm like, great, so am I. What else do you do with it?
Right.
And they'll be like, what? Right. What do you mean? I'm like, do you do anything else than,
social media,
those three things? And they're so confounded by my question. And then now they want to ask me, they want to tell me about how they're worried about their children's education. And I would ask them, have you ever looked for things that can supplement your children's education and schooling online? There's all of these resources, right? Free, that's gamified, that's an app, that's videos, like there's no shortage of options.
Right.
Have you ever looked at it? And they're like, what?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, you don't know what you don't know. If you didn't know that there was all these educational opportunities available on the internet, you wouldn't go search for it.
Right.
So then I started asking them, have you ever done a Google search? And they're like, what? How do you do a Google search? This is when I realized they live in a world of streaming, but they're watching 3 channels.
Right.
And they don't know that they're watching 3 channels.
Right. You don't know what you don't
know.
And
I was like, but if you knew all these different things, then A, you can access resources better. You can protect yourself better. And now the internet becomes a different a different beast, if you will, right? It becomes
Right.
an active resources rather than 100%. It becomes a tool rather than a place of entertainment distraction.
Right.
So that was the idea that Hello Future was founded on, digital literacy and digital basics.
So
And since then, go ahead.
no. Okay, so we're going to unpack so much of this,
Yeah.
right? So because I want to talk about what Hello Future is doing and why I immediately was like, how do I help? Right. The first time we even met in person, we had connected, on email through another group, and then we met in person, and I really was touched by the population that you're trying, an audience you're trying to provide impact for. So many people think refugee and vulnerable population, absolutely, don't have any opportunities. That's so far away. That's so far removed from my life. How could I help? And yet you go to Istanbul, great city, and you're in there. You're literally living what, when you think about educating people on just what a refugee camp looks like, and we were talking about this the other day, it's a city. These are mini cities with business and schools and life that happens, correct? Can you hear me?
Yeah. So, yes,
Sorry.
like I lose a bit here and there, but I think I got the gist of it.
Okay.
So we, yes, refugees. I think the public perception of refugees is their vulnerabilities, and we often talk about their vulnerabilities, but rarely do we talk about their capacities.
Right.
Right. And I think, not just I know from experience, they have so much capacity. And they're so eager to work and to strive and to excel, because they so much want to improve their circumstances. Right. And I don't think we talk about that enough. I think we talk a lot more about protection, right?
Right.
And how do we meet the bare minimum kind of food, water, and shelter standards, right? So we work in refugee camp in northern Iraq, and we work with refugee teenagers, 15 to 18-ish. So through my year of research in Istanbul and then later in northern Iraq and Kurdistan, the discovery was that there were very little opportunities or programming for teenagers. The legacy organizations like Save the Children focuses on little kids, grade K through 4. And then different organizations will step in to do basically heads of household at like 25 plus, right? But you have this huge gap in there, which I think are such fundamental years that shapes us as who we are.
Absolutely.
And then I think it also the years in which we're the most vulnerable, right? The young men are vulnerable for radicalization. The girls are vulnerable for early marriages when there's no other option. So we focus on that particular group of people. There's a virtual reality tour on our website, where you can just kind of drag around and see these 180 photos of what the camp looks like. They're mini cities. There's stores and shops. Refugees engage in a tremendous amount of informal economic activities that, again, like people don't think about, right? Because people go, where do they get their money from?
Right.
Right. How do they have money to do things, right? Remittance is a big portion of it. They get money sent to them by relatives, again, in formal channels and informal channels, often very informal channels for refugees. So I remember I was talking to somebody when I was in Istanbul, and he still had family back in Syria, and he was talking about sending money home. And I was like, how do you do that? He's like, oh, you just know somebody and you give him the money, and then he'll give it to somebody else. And they literally pass it down through a chain of events until it ends up in my family's hands.
Wow.
And everybody takes a cut in percent, essentially.
Right.
And I was like, wow, A, that's a lot of trust. B, like, what's the rate, essentially? I don't remember anymore, but it was a lot less than I anticipated it to be.
Wow.
So remittance is one thing, in how they have cash. In Kurdistan, the refugees are allowed to work if they can find work.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, the legacy organizations, UNHCR, World Food Program, um, alike are moving towards cash assistance. So there's a certain amount of, instead of giving you a bag of food, right, they're giving you money to buy what you need for your household.
Right.
So there's cash flowing in that economy. Um, and so, there's stores to go with it, right? Stores selling basic daily goods. And one of my favorite things is, and every time we go back to the camp, and seeing how this wedding dress shop evolved since my very first time there in 2016 to now. So in 2016, there's this main street where most of the shops are located, and there's a very kind of informal wedding dress shop. So we're talking about cinder block homes, dirt roads, and there's just this like one big wide fluffy wedding dress hung outside of it and a poster, right? Like the store didn't really have an enclosure,
sign. Yeah. Oh, okay.
right? It's almost like it was like hung outside of somebody's house and they're saying like, this is our business.
Right.
And then in subsequent years, they built out a little glass enclosure. So it's almost like they extended their porch. And so now like there's a very kind of formalized shop. And there are more dresses.
Right.
Right. And in one of the virtual reality segments on our site that you can see, now the shop is like a little bit bigger and there are multiple dresses, and there's a little beauty section where, I think you can get your makeup done, and like buy a little bit of beauty product for your big day. And like, that's so special to me because it tells me that it doesn't matter of their circumstances, these huge life moments are still something that A, matters, and B, that they strive towards.
Yeah, it's the resilience, and almost I don't know what's happening around in the outside world, but I know this is important to me, my family, our community, and we're going to continue to move forward. And you talk about life moments, right? Life moments, particularly in the age group that Hello Future is working with, that 15, 16 to 18. It's a tough age anywhere in the world, right? Then you throw on all of these other circumstances. But one of the things that you're really focused on at Hello Future and giving them this technology to be able to, bring them tools to better themselves is how to run a business. Also very near and dear to my heart, and how to run a business. And so I think what's so unique and innovative about Hello Future is how you're teaching these kids so that they can find their voices and then create a path. So can you talk a little bit about sort of where that started and what's your goal with Hello Future and where you see it going?
Absolutely. So, I was a theater major, right? I like to say that I got a degree in learning how to make something out of nothing, because that's theater, right? You walk into a black box and you create a world. I've always been an entrepreneur. I was, even before I graduated, and I've always worked for myself. 20 years. I've always been my own boss. So the entrepreneurial skill has taken me very far. And so I think if we had to like pick skills, right? Like, what is a one set of skills that somebody can take with them and learn and just really have a real long tail impact throughout their lifetime?
Mm-hmm.
I think entrepreneurial skills are top of that list, right? Like,
Agreed.
I would pick that over coding.
Right.
I would pick that over STEM, right? So having been in the field for a few years and doing digital literacy, digital basics, I started thinking about like, what would self-reliance look like for them, right? The digital skills is a great place to start, but I didn't think that was enough.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, we built out a series of courses that leads to a small business incubator. Now, it's not a technology incubator. They're not asked to invent a technology product,
Yep.
right? They're asked to think about it in a small business term. So like mom and pop shops, right? Just like the wedding dress, right? Just like the bodega, right? And the thing I really love about them is that it enables them to become community leaders and to positively influence their communities in the ways that they want to. Right. And if they're successful, they can also become employers, so they're job creators. Right. And I think that's so exciting. So so there's 4 foundational courses, and we teach them lots of essential skills that I think a business person needs to have. And then they'll get trained in this small business incubator for 4 months. And at the end of it, they'll get a small cash grant, right? Because great ideas and great business plans isn't enough without access to capital, right? And being a refugee and being in a region where access to capital is deeply challenged. They need that cash infusion to just jumpstart things. So at the end of the incubator, there's a cash grant to go with that.
And one of the things that is I think so interesting about the program is you're setting them up, right? Not just for themselves, but that there's these resources, there's tools, there's introductions, and access as a word is so important, right? Yes, the capital, education, community, introductions, elevating them within their community, that they're part of this. But then as you give them these skills, and I like that you said it's entrepreneur skills, better than coding, better than STEM. I mean, you need these in order to then do the coding and do the STEM, because it's all part of it, is that they can then teach others in their community. They can create jobs, and they can begin to build the next generation of those leaders, because now they've got that foundation.
100%. And, lots of people ask, like, what kind of business do you think these kids are capable of starting, right? And again, I think this is where we default to our assumption of their vulnerabilities rather than seeing them for their capacities. One of my favorite example is, so in our introduction course in Hello Future 101, there is a $5 business activity. They work in groups. Part of the objective is for them to learn how to work in groups, right? These kids never really had those kind of training before. So collaboration is important, and they have to figure themselves out. They get the equivalent of $5 per team. They have 5 days to plan and 2 hours to execute. And then they create a presentation, complete with a very rudimentary P&L, to tell us like what happened, right? One of my favorite examples. So in the prior lesson, they had just had their virtual reality lesson. They had experienced virtual reality. They made their virtual reality, and the team decided that they wanted to do a virtual reality business. They spend their $5 capital with us in renting out the headsets, and then they took their little mobile phone, put it inside the headset, and they split their own team up in 2 subgroups. One subgroup walked around the camp for 2 hours, asking everybody that they ran into, would you like a virtual reality tour to anywhere in the world you like?
Right.
And, they did okay. They, the people they ran into had choice paralysis.
Right.
Which the teens didn't really understand that concept.
Right.
But I love how they were essentially splitting themselves up into an A/B test without knowing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then the other group, right, they decided that they were only going to offer one thing. They walk around the camp and offer the camp residents that they ran into a virtual reality tour to Mecca.
It's genius.
It was brilliant, Cate. I was like, oh my God, this is so good. At the end of the 2 hours, the entire team brought in $26 for their $5 investment in 2 hours.
Right.
right? And I was like, hey, this is a brilliant business idea. But it's so good is because you guys had community insights
Right.
that others wouldn't have, right? You guys understand how important this is to the grandmothers and the grandfathers who will most likely never be able to go on the Hajj, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so you spoke to that need and you went and gave them a version of it, right? Like get this cleaned up, like this is a real business. And there's so many things that is so ingenious and wonderful in what these teams created in a matter of a week
Right.
with so little resources.
So you think
So I
about
think
what when you actually give resources and provide access to those resources, what they could do, right?
100%, 100%, right? And giving them the room to be creative, and what we do is we help them see the opportunities in between these spaces, right? Rather than being like, well, I can teach you how to sew so you can get a job as a
Right.
seamstress,
Right.
right? Like that's really prescriptive. Um, and again, like acknowledging that they have so much talent and so much, ingenuity that we don't even think about. And giving them the skills and the tours and the mentorship to go do those things.
So with the last couple of minutes, what's your outlook? What's your objective for Hello Future as you're now 5 years in? And it seems like to me, as I've gotten involved, you're scratching the surface, but there's a tremendous amount of opportunity here to make impact and real change.
Absolutely. So we're launching this small business incubator. We're piloting it this fall. We're super excited about it. This is kind of the last piece in our puzzle. And once we're done at that, I believe the way forward to create deeper and broader impact is to license our curriculum and build out a train-the-trainer models so that more other nonprofits, wherever they are, right, can access our curriculum. Will help train their teachers to teach this curriculum, and let us spread that way. I think that's probably a little bit more nimble than if we were to replicate ourselves site to site.
There's so much to take this forward, and how, I mean, I'm just one example that we met, and I looked into it and really wanted to get more involved. Where can people? I've been putting it up in the banners, but where is the best place for people to find out more, to get involved? Just tell everybody.
You can definitely learn more about our work, the Small Business Incubator, and different ways to get involved as mentors and speakers and judges on our site at hellofuture.io.
Hellofuture.io, and you can follow Hello Future at _Hello Future on Instagram. And I have one last question for you, Charlie, as you have had a remarkable journey and path from that little girl that got sent away, didn't understand the language, didn't speak the language, to now. What would you tell that same little girl when you experienced that originally, now knowing what you know and what opportunities are out there?
I think my advice to my younger self is the same. It is applicable to many, irrespective of gender, and if they've ever been sent away or not, is that you're more than good enough.
You're more than good enough. I love that. And certainly, I think because I've had the opportunity, even virtually, to meet a dozen or so of the young women that are part of the Hello Future classes, you can see that loud and clear just in who they are already, just giving them a little bit. And I think this world has to remember it doesn't take much, right, to do a lot for someone else.
Absolutely. I mean, there's showing up matters so much, and believing in them.
Exactly. I love it. I love it. Well, Charlie, I want to, and there's a couple of comments in the chat about the fantastic work you're doing, but also that you are more than good enough. Yes, and exclamation points. And I think that particularly girls need to hear that. And if you think back 20 plus years ago when you were trying to convince those clients that representation matters and that it doesn't have to be just one way. Think about how far you have come.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at the ads today and I was like, this is not what we're doing 20 years ago. Right?
Exactly. Well, you maybe started a trend, right? And it's no longer a trend. This is what we need to be doing every day. Charlie, thank you so much for being on here, and look forward to hearing more and being more involved with Hello Future. And also, thanks for being a Luminary member. We love having you so as part of our community. Have a great weekend. And we will see you soon. Next guest, we have back-to-back episodes today by Charlie
Thank you,
of Goaldigger. And we've got Chana Ewing. So welcome, Chana. How are you?
Hello. Can you hear me? This is like my first time on StreamYard and all the things.
We can hear you, and you you look fabulous as always.
Thank you. I love your earrings.
Thank you. My Target. Love my little Target purchases. So, all right, we're on back-to-back episodes, and Charlie's part of the list, and it's a list day, I guess. Chana, there's no way I can describe you and your story and everything that you're doing. So before we get into how you've been gold digging and focused on building this empire building with Jeannie, can you just give us a little bit of your background and your story?
Yeah, sure. So again, thanks for having me, Cate. This is fun. Again, I'm so new to StreamYard, so I love using new platforms, but thanks for having me. So I'm Chana Janelle Ewing, and I'm the founder and CEO of Jeannie. Prior to that, this is my second entrepreneurial endeavor. So prior to that, I had a business called Little Big Girl and Co., which was essentially a digital marketing services company for documentaries. So we worked with filmmakers, producers, and distributors around new releases, primarily focused on targeting people of color, millennials, and also just like social issue documentaries. So basically how to reach new audiences for these films. That's the business that I've been in for the past like decade. A lot of the films, I'm trying to think about some films that folks may know. Let's see. I worked on the Black Panthers documentary that was on PBS a few years ago. That was one of mine. We did a few Oscar campaigns. So Strong Island, which was up for an Oscar a few years ago, and it's on Netflix. So that's another one that folks might know. But a lot of them tend to be like and then there's a film right now that we worked on just last year, and that's called Through the Night, and it's about childcare. And actually, and it's so funny because it's about childcare and specifically like working class women who need to use 24-hour daycare centers in order to support their work. And it just couldn't have come out. I mean, obviously at the time, it seemed like it was not a great time to come out, but it came out last year originally, and just premiered on PBS over Mother's Day. So that's a lot of the work that I've been doing. So it's really been around like storytelling and, how to think about stories and unpack them for impact, if you will, like how to connect them to specific audiences. And, after working in services, like doing client work for so many years, I really got attracted to this idea of building a scalable product. And so that's, how Jeannie was born. I was like, how, when you're working in a service environment, there's only so much more you can like duplicate yourself, your thinking, and your team's thinking. And it can feel like a lot, going from project to project. And so I really, I love entrepreneurship, and I wanted to figure out like, what could we build that would be scalable, that would still create impact, that would still tell a story. And so we started with Genie a few years. Well, Genie has had more than one iteration. So you're familiar with the very first iteration, which was like a subscription box company. And that was really around like packaging the stories of Black women in this subscription box format. So we would have different amazing Black women curate a moment in their lives. Usually it was around a launch of a book. So they would include their book and then a few lifestyle products that told the story of the book and told the story of the things that really that brought them joy. So that was the first iteration of Genie. Of Genie,
yeah.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right. That's the one we got. And I have to give a shout out to Chanel Cate, who is one of my dear friends and yours, and has worked with Luminary since literally the beginning. She is who introduced us to Genie. And I remember you had your holiday party at Luminary in December of when we literally had just launched.
I think it was December 2018.
Right? We hadn't even like fully opened.
Yeah.
And you had it, and you had these incredible boxes. So that's where my first sort of exposure to Genie. We kind of lost 2020, but that is a 2+ years ago, right? Almost 3 years ago. First of all, what inspired you to start Genie in its original form? And then how has it sort of transformed over the past 2+ years?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I've always really been obsessed with storytelling, and also this idea that like identity stories in particular really have the power to impact people and be transformative. You see yourself in other people and the things that they've gone through and the things that they're accomplishing and the things that they love. And so that's really like a big passion of mine. And on that note, one story in particular that I really loved back in 2009, when I initially came up with a totally different concept, but it's related to Genie Box, was Michelle Obama. I was just really, Michelle Obama came onto the world stage, and I was like, we never had, a Black first lady. We never had, a Black businesswoman in such on the world stage, and
right, in a very positive way.
Back in 2009, right? Like, I mean, obviously, this is not to say that there are tons of amazing Black women that have been doing all sorts of amazing work over time, but at that moment, it felt like it was a big deal to have her presence in 2009, and so I created a brunch to celebrate her, and it was called Michelle O Brunch. And I invited a few friends, and I told them to invite friends. And really, it was just like, like, let's celebrate this moment. Let's be excited. Let's talk about what she means to you as like a Black woman professional, like all that other good stuff. And so that first brunch was really fun. It was a great opportunity to like network. Back in 2009, I was like, this is great because like, a lot of you sometimes you don't necessarily get moments of really intimate environments with women, for like 2 or 3 hours, it's like a 25 women brunch. So you're really going to truly meet people and dig deep. So we did that, and that was fun. And I was like, well, let me just continue doing that. And we did that for like a number of years. We made no money really at all. Basically, we would do the event, like charge to cover the expenses of the brunch. So we'd get a space, and then if they say it's like $30 per plate, then we would just, give that over to the guests. But that was really it. And it wasn't really like super formal, but we did it from say 2009 to about 2014. So 5 years really. And it was like a major event with actually Social Media Week in 2014. So I was like, well, this thing that I'm doing on the side that like I'm not making any money from like I really love. I'm really enjoying this concept of networking and women's empowerment and storytelling, all this like big mesh. And so when moving forward, when I was like, okay, what's going to be my next career move? And I like, oh, you want to build a scalable product. That's kind of when you started to see a lot of the subscription boxes started to pop up around 2014, 2015. And it was like, all right, well, here's an opportunity. I don't have any, like, I'm not a technologist. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a developer. So like, here's an opportunity to build something scalable without, really a hard tech background.
Right.
And so that was really the concept of Genie Box initially, was that we were going to change the name from Michelle O'Brunch to Genie Box. And the idea would be we would have little Michelles, little Oprahs in the box. Meaning like, women that weren't on the scale of, say, Michelle Obama or Oprah, but like everyday Black women who are doing incredible things, and they would tell their story in this box format. So that was the genesis of the original Genie Box.
And you did not raise money for that, or you did?
No. So like we did not raise any money. Well, and also like, so a lot of, I just turned 40 this year. Like I like to say that I'm like, well, I am an elder millennial. So like, the top of the millennial, even though I'm now hearing that people that were born in 1980 are millennials too. So I don't know.
You're a zennial. It's called
yeah,
a zennial.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think looking back on like some of the things that I've done throughout my life, it was because I didn't know. Like I didn't know that we would need money. Like,
right.
I had no idea.
Did it.
Exactly. I don't come from an entrepreneurial background. There are no entrepreneurs in my family. I come from a very, very working class background. And so, literally first, like one of like my cousin, my age mate, and I were the first two people to graduate from college, in our family at the same time.
And where are you originally from?
We're from Boston.
Okay.
Yeah. So just not knowing a lot, like at all, but I've just always been super ambitious, and also have always had an incredible mother who has just like supported my every whim, even if we don't have the money to do it. She's just is like all in on her only child, so it's that's kind of the thing. So and I could get away with that really in the other business model. We weren't making a lot of money with Little Big Girl, but I could etch out a living, doing that sort of souped up freelance small agency model. It was fun. I could etch out a living and be kind of okay, right?
Yeah.
But then you start trying to build something at scale, it's like, no, you need to raise money, and I, had a few conversations early on. It didn't seem like people were really getting it. It was, they were like, well, why are you doing anything that's targeting Black women in particular? And so I was like, well, whatever, I'm going to just go ahead and do my thing. So, we didn't raise money for that original piece. And nor do I think we would have been able to really be successful raising anyway, just because of the state of the funding environment.
There's so much in this. Like it's.
I know. Sorry,
No.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing. I think this is what I love about these conversations. Certainly about a community like Luminary, and then the community like Genie is like. We're so complex and multidimensional, and it's not everything is linear like in the old days, right? And so you create this company, and oh, by the way, you also write a best-selling children's book, right? The ABCs of Equality in your spare time. The world starts to change, right? And Genie as a company also changes dramatically, and you pivot. Not only do you pivot, you do end up going and raising money. And we'll talk a little bit about that story as a Black queer woman raising money in a very white male environment for a community that puts culture first. Like, it doesn't get harder than that, Jenna, right? When you're putting this in front of people, it's like, what? So talk about the transition of the company and then making that decision to say, I am going to raise money and I'm going to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like you'll notice that like I feel like every change is also a change in my own leadership, right?
Yeah.
So like every time I learn something new about what I can do as an entrepreneur, as a leader, then you see a change, right? So like, going from Little Big Girl to building Genie Box, it was like, oh, I noticed I could potentially do something. Here I've been doing this free thing for a little while. Maybe I should monetize it, maybe I could do this. So it's like every time, and I'm sure this is true of a lot of, women and non-binary folks and other marginalized genders, is that like you realize something in yourself and then you go out and try to like do that thing, right? So with Genie Box, we had been doing it for a number of years and literally, again, never really making much money, always kind of in the red.
Yeah.
Like, okay, what's going on here? Like we have like a nice sort of continuous base of customers, not huge, but like, a nice base of customers. I think we have a great idea around this idea of at the time I was kind of thinking about it as terms of like heritage-based shopping.
Right.
Like this idea that people like pride of purchase, that's kind of how I would describe it, but people were buying from Genie Box because we were celebrating Black women, we were putting Black brands in front of them, and so you felt good. You had pride in the things that you were buying, and you were maybe substituting other things that you might have gotten elsewhere for these other smaller businesses, right? So it's like this is a really great discovery vehicle for small businesses. So like using those kind of that thought process, it was like, all right, well, by this end of December 2019, we had already decided that we were moving to a different business model. So way even before the like racial reckoning and pandemic of 2020, we were already on track, like tracking to move to a different business model. Initially, like we were actually thinking about going into like kiosk and vending machines. Like that was actually our initial thought process, but then that became tricky. Like as we saw March in the pandemic, we're like, no one's gonna want to like touch anything. Like no one's gonna like, and so like, and also like the world is locking down, and like putting that together, we would have needed to do a big raise, like really early on. And so then it became like, all right, well, what other business model could we go into where we would still have the opportunity to showcase small businesses? Because that's really my like thing. Like I want to advance small businesses. I want to impact the economy, right? And so we looked at like the marketplace model, and our take on it, and this actually came out of, I'm glad you mentioned the book, because that it came out of the experience of writing the book, was that like the ways in which multiple identities inform our experiences. And so, when I went into this pivot, I really wanted to surface that perspective, the perspective that I got from writing that children's book, which is that like, I previously sort of like, obviously I knew that I was queer. Obviously I know that I'm Black, but like I previously like only would like talk about one dimension, like, or two dimensions, being a Black woman, right? But then in writing that book, like, C is for class and D is for disability and blah, blah, blah. And like, and like going through that motion, it was like, it kind of was like, well, actually, your experience is the collision and connection of these identities. Like you are raised working class. That is a fundamental aspect of the way you see the world, and the reason why you're so gung-ho about economic justice and moving money to entrepreneur, like all of that stuff that's why that's there. Queer, I feel like I put a queer line over everything. Like I see everything through a queer lens. So like I really wanted to kind of create space in this new environment, our new kind of marketplace environment, and where we were to really surface these stories. And that's why we came up with the concept of like culture first beauty, which is that like, we're surfacing the stories, we're thinking about identity, we're thinking about impact, and we're thinking about ingredients, and we're connecting the dots between the three to have this really rich environment of shopping.
If you go on Genie World's website, and I'll put it up there, genie.world, right? Number one, the first thing that when this launched that I saw was other people, right? Representation. And we were just talking about that with Charlie. Beautiful, powerful, confident. Doesn't matter what your identity is. And you could be multiple identities, right? Not in a negative way. Like I could be a Black woman and a queer woman. I could be a Black man and a queer woman. I could be transgender, all of that. And this idea of culture first beauty, where did that come from? Because from what I know, you're the only one that's really talking about this.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Honestly, it was born out of and you'll still see the word, throughout the site, and you'll still see it in like my bio. And actually, if you look up intersectionality and intersectional beauty, the first name that'll come up will be mine, So like, it really was born out of this idea that, okay, what it's going to seem like we're talking about is intersectionality, right? Because we are talking about the convergence of identities and how multiple identities come together within a person, and how those impact their experiences, right? But intersectionality really is a legal term that Kimberly Crenshaw came up with, and she's really talking about it through the lens of the Black experience and how multiple identities collide within the Black experience, to talk about the very particular experience of being, like, say, a Black trans person or Black disabled person, or, and the way oppressions layer and impact people, and how we need to think about that in the legal community and in politics in particular, because when we're talking about people and how discrimination works, right? So that's her real concept of intersectionality. Since then, like, it's blown up in pop culture to mean all sorts of things to all sorts of people, right? And really, like, I wanted to say that this is a trajectory for us, and like it definitely informs my thinking as a Black queer woman, but like, here's my take, and my take is culture first. And what that means, what I'm talking about with culture first, is that not only do identities collide to impact and oppress people, but also identities collide to really unlock people. So I see, like, the layering and the multiple identities that I live in really contributing to my genius, really contributing to the way that I see the world. And there's great knowledge there, right? And so I wanted to honor that, because, and also the other thing too, what happens in I think so often in entrepreneurship, and is that, like, we always think, oh, let's support underrepresented founders or whatever have you, just because, like, oh, but it's actually like, let's support people who are closest to the problems that they're trying to solve.
Right.
Because there's real genius in people who are connected to problems that they also have that they're trying to solve for. So, like, I really wanted to kind of like be able to meld this idea together into this concept of culture first beauty, which is that this is a lens that really respects the idea that, there's genius in your identity stew. There's genius in understanding what goes into a product, like thinking about what's inside of a product. And also you should know what's the reason for its being, what's the impact that brand plans to have in the world, and to think about all those things when you go and make a purchase. Like, don't demand a business. I think so often we'll demand for businesses to do things afterwards. Like, oh, like you're a business that exists in the world and you don't do X, Y, and Z, which there's nothing wrong with that, right? But there's a whole, as you know, because you have a platform for small businesses, there is a whole world of small businesses that are speaking to our unique needs, that have our same values, that share our ethos in so many different ways. And like, if we can just reroute our attention and reroute our dollars in those direction, in that direction, we would all be better off for it.
No, I love that. We say vote with your dollars, right? So especially after what happened and the murder of George Floyd and many others, and the I would say the reckoning and the recognition that things have to change in this country, and not just in this country. I think many people became more aware of where they're putting their money, right?
Yes.
Who's the company? Who's on the board? What do they stand for? What are their policies? And across all, right, of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I think it's now people are able to make a more conscious decision around who they buy from. You really embrace, the founder, let's raise each other up. I love FemPower, who's on the Genie platform, is our friends and members at Luminary too, and we love them. But you also, during this pandemic, relaunched the business and you fundraise. And with the last couple of minutes, would just love, because those are huge milestones. I remember when that came out, and it's like you raised money during this time, and a significant amount of money.
Well, so we raised money, which was, I mean, listen, I'm excited because that's like something I've never done before in my life. So like, I'm just continuing to like level up as an entrepreneur on behalf of the business, and like really kind of like figuring out what the business needs from me, which is, I think, is a key thing that we all need to think about. Like, what is the business going to require you? Who is the business going to require you to become? Right? Like, that's actually the question that we should all ask ourselves as entrepreneurs. And so we did raise. It was actually a small raise, but it was a first raise. And I think that, so I'm still celebrating, because it actually, it's like almost like you're training wheels. Like, you're like, here's this thing, you hear all these stats about this thing, you hear about how hard it is to do, you hear how like it's not going to be something that you could do, it's a pandemic, it's like, like all these things, right, to keep you from getting on the bike, and and like really experiencing the training wheels. And so I'm just really proud of myself for like putting all of that behind, and setting on the journey of finding most of them largely other entrepreneurs, but other folks who really believed in the mission of Genie and decided to invest in us early at the very first round. So before even our pre-seed, like just small angel round. And I'm grateful that I had the foresight to do it, and that I found the people that understood the mission, the vision, and where this could potentially go. We're talking about, we're talking about a whole new way of shopping, and we're also talking about the buying power of multicultural consumers, right? So at the end of the day, we're building out a business. It isn't a nonprofit. So I'm also thrilled that I was able to find investors that really saw the potential and where we can go with this vision.
And by the way, many companies, like Luminary is a great example. We're for profit, but we're also delivering impact and real social impact and impact for good and change. And just like Genie, right? And it's okay that we're trying to also make money and create generational wealth.
Absolutely.
For ourselves, our families, and our communities. And you are doing that. And I have put up here during the conversation where to find you on Instagram. So it's at Genie Worlds, and then where to shop. So don't just find out more about Genie, shop, buy from Genie, right? That's how we actually create successful businesses. If we not only say we're supporting and it's great, we buy from each other. So shop at www.genie.world. One last question before I let you go. So when you think of that, I asked Charlie a similar question, but I'm going to change it a little bit. This girl growing up in Boston, you're already doing remarkable things, creating Oscar-winning films, writing a book. Where do you see Jeannie going in this world?
Well, I mean, honestly, I want it to be this like literal new place to. So right now, like you see Genie like is an e-commerce website, right? Separately from that, we've been growing this small community on this platform called Geneva. And what the real thesis is like, how do we integrate the two and to really develop a community-based shopping platform? So something that enables both social networking, connection, t- loving beauty, sharing your beauty ideas, sharing your beauty tips, but also a full integration with the small brands and allowing an ecosystem of buying, sharing, and discovery. So like that's the real vision. And like we really are interested in this idea of creating a new paradigm for community-based and social shopping.
Well, you are well on. Oops, sorry. You are well on your way, and we are excited to watch this and support it, and not just be on the sidelines, but actively engaged. And so, thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing Jeannie to life in all its different iterations and what it's going to become. Everyone, please shop from Genie.world, easy, and their Instagram is also phenomenal. So at Genie World. Shanna, thank you again so much for being here. Hopefully we'll see you in person, back at the Glass Ceiling and Luminary soon.
Absolutely. I'll be there. Glass Ceiling is beautiful.
Thank you.
So congratulations again. It's really lovely. You'll see me there lots of times this summer. So
yeah, it was so good to see you in person a few weeks ago. Everyone have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you on Goaldigger next Friday. Have a great weekend. Thanks.